Welcome into the Stokastic.com NASCAR Live Before Lock shows. We're here to get you ready for today's NASCAR race up there in Wisconsin as we are road racing. So we are going to talk about how to break down this slate here today. Of course, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. Later on in the show, we'll talk about some of those props over there at Prize Picks. Of course, as always here on NASCAR Live Before Lock show, I am joined by Chris Pennell. Chris, always great to be here on a Sunday afternoon talking to you. And, you know, I mean, a little birdie, well, maybe you told me this. I hear you're a little anti-Toyota today.
It's funny because last weekend I was very pro-Toyota, but times have changed this weekend, just going by the numbers this week. And, you know, so far this season, they've really struggled at the road courses. But looking forward to today's race, Jason. Should be a fun one, and happy early 4th of July to everybody watching.
Oh, yeah. Hopefully everyone's having a safe 4th of July celebration out there. I mean, obviously road racing. I know you mentioned on a video this week, not necessarily your ideal type of racing, but you do have luck when it comes to DFS over here. So how do you attack lineup construction in terms of road racing?
Yeah, road racing from an entertainment standpoint, it gets pretty boring. It's kind of fun at the end once you see strategies playing off, but just to watch it stage 1, stage 2, to be honest, it gets a little bit boring. But as far as how we should approach this from a DFS perspective, what I typically do is, well, first off, we don't really need to worry about dominator points whatsoever, especially this weekend. Usually at road courses, we can get a little bit more laps than what we have this weekend, but only 62 on the schedule. We're talking 43 total dominator points. That is not a lot. So even if a guy like a Chase Elliott, like a Kyle Larson, really any of those drivers starting close to the front lead some laps, they're basically going to have to win or come top 3, especially at Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson's price point. They basically have to win to be optimal today. So not factoring in dominator points is definitely something that you need to consider for road courses. I am basically just kind of focusing on guys that can finish high and place differential that they offer us.
Of course, we do have 2 drivers going to the rear. The most notable would be Kyle Busch. He was scheduled to start 13th, so obviously kind of a drastic change there. And of course, the man that was starting 36, so I'm not really worried about that. But I mean, first off, we'll talk about Kyle Busch going to the rear. You know, with a starting spot of 13th, does that change your thought process on him today?
If this was a track that was more focused on dominator points, it would change it a little bit. But to be honest, I didn't really like Kyle Busch anyway. So him going to the rear just made me even drop his exposure even more because, like we said earlier to open the show, the Toyotas have not been strong at the road courses this year. And if we're looking at the practice numbers for Kyle Busch, P22 in the 1 lap, P14 in the 5 lap, I don't think he's going to completely struggle for a top 25 or anything today. But at his price point, you basically need him to be a top 5 potential winner. And I just do not see that happening from him today. So him going to the rear has no effect, but I didn't like him either way.
Of course, if you got any questions on this driver, leave those right here in the YouTube chat. You can also leave those over our Score NASCAR channel. We'll get to those as we go throughout the show. Of course, you know, we're going to break this one down for you. We're going to start at the top of the salaries. We'll talk mid-tier, then we'll get lower tier before we get into all of your questions. Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button. That does help us out a ton over here at Stokastic.com. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. Of course, we got you covered each and every day for everything going on in terms of DFS. So let's get right into the upper tier salaries here, Chris. So $9K and above over here. So let's start off right with Kyle Larson. He is starting 3rd, 11,400, 13,500 over there on FanDuel. Obviously, you know, the place differential, well, there's not really much place differential there. And obviously with dominator points, not a focus of emphasis this week. How do you evaluate Kyle with a large price tag?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think he's going to have a bad race. He was fast in practice, and he's been great at road courses the past couple of seasons, and probably the best car at Sonoma early on before he ended up screwing up his strategy. But the thing is, at his massive price point, it's kind of hard to build lineups with him because I feel like we can go very balanced this weekend and get a lot of good drivers in our lineups instead of going stars and scrubs. And honestly, I was kind of surprised with the pricing this weekend. I actually thought we'd have like maybe 2 to 3 drivers that were around 10K, but 2 above $11,000 for such a short race. If you're playing Larson, you are betting on him winning because if he does not win, you're more than likely not going to see him in the optimal. So I personally am going a bit underweight in the field because I feel like his price is a little bit too high.
By the way, should note, I was just looking right before the show, a lock time on DraftKings, 3:23 p.m. Eastern time. So once the show is over, you have plenty of time to lock in those lineups over there on DraftKings. Next up, we got the man that's on the poll, Chase Elliott, 11,100 DraftKings, 14,000 on FanDuel. I mean, it is pretty much the path for Chase Elliott here. If we're going to put him in our tournament lineups, is you got to be thinking that he's going to lead a majority of this race.
Yes, for Chase Elliott to be in the optimal, basically has to win the race, because starting on the pole for a 62-lap race, he's not going to lead every lap. Like, could he be the main lap leader? Sure, but there's going to be drivers that stay out, different strategies, guys that are going to pit, short pit. So he's not going to be up front the entire day. So once he gets out of the front of the race, he's going to have to work his way back up there, which is certainly possible. I mean, if you had to pick one driver to win this race, Elliott would be the main guy you think of, because he's so good at road courses, and at the technical road courses since last year, he's been in the top 5 all but once, and he has an average finish of 3rd. Like, yeah, it's Chase Elliott road course, probably gonna go down as the best ever when it's all said and done for Chase Elliott. But at his price point and where he's starting, if he's gonna approach, let's just say, for example, 25-30% today, I'm gonna be a little bit underweight on that. Do I think he's gonna have a great day? Sure, but for DFS purposes, when I can get drivers in the 9K range with similar upside, I'd rather go that route.
Then we got Kyle Busch, who we just mentioned about going to the rear for engine. He was scheduled to start 13th in here, 10,800 DraftKings, 12,000 on FanDuel. I mean, yes, he could work his way up, get a little bit of place differential, but I mean, it's a big price tag to where we got a guy that's going to have to work his way all the way up just to start getting us some positive points.
Right. And like I mentioned earlier, the Toyotas and JGRs really struggled at the road courses so far this year, which is kind of odd, because all these guys at JGR are very good road course racers. And if you expand that to all Toyotas, Kurt Busch is great at road courses, Bubba Wallace not so much, but they've really been pretty bad this year. Kyle Busch finished 30th at Sonoma a couple weeks ago and 28th at Coda earlier in the season. He's a great road course racer in general, but it just doesn't seem like JGR is really selling out for the road courses this year. So starting in 13th, going to the rear, slow in practice, I'd rather be underway here.
Next up, we got Ross Chastain. He is starting 10,300 on DraftKings, 13,000 on FanDuel. And just to throw it out there, let's just say he's a little popular today.
Yeah, I definitely love Ross Chastain. Of all the 10K and up drivers, he's the one I actually don't mind getting to. And you get a little bit of a price discount compared to guys like Larson Elliott, and you get some more PD spots as well. He finished 7th at Sonoma, 1st at Coda. Team Trackhouse has won both road course races this year. You have to imagine he's going to be fast once again. He's been the fastest car average green flag speed-wise at road courses this year. So Chastain, one of my highest owned drivers on both sites today.
The next 2 drivers are both Joe Gibbs drivers here in the Toyotas, that being Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. Hamlin starting 14th, Truex Jr. starting 15th. Hamlin 10,200 on DraftKings, 9,500 on FanDuel. For Truex, 9,600 on DraftKings, 900 on FanDuel. I'll relate these 2 drivers together to a question that came in on the YouTube chat from Cameron. He says, I know Chris said he's fading the JGR cars, but is getting a 5 to 10% exposure a good idea?
I think when you're talking like 5 to 10%, that's fine, because I'm in a similar boat. I don't have quite 10%, but I have around 3 to 6% on the JGR drivers outside of Christopher Bell, which we'll talk about him. I do like him quite a bit today, but just lumping Hamlin and Truex in together, all the JGR cars qualified right next to each other, so you can kind of lump them in all together. But if you're looking at Hamlin this year, road courses, 31st at Sonoma, 18th at Coda. Truex was 26th at Sonoma, and he was really bad during that race. Even though they pit at the end to kind of kill their day, he was just really slow either way. But they did finish 7th at Coda, but green flag speed-wise, he hasn't really checked out too much. I'm not a huge fan of either. They're kind of interesting for where they're starting, but I'd rather be underweight and get overexposed to the drivers we're about to talk about, because there's a lot of good plays coming up.
All right, so let's go to Joey Logano. He is starting 18th, 9,400 on DraftKings, 12,500 on FanDuel, and he is getting ownership.
Yeah, Joey's a fine play. I don't like him quite as much as the next driver. His teammate starting one spot further back, but he's going to be an interesting pivot there. Wasn't as fast in practice, though, but he's a fine road course racer. Did finish 17th at Sonoma, 31st at Coda, but we know he's got top 5 upside at road courses. I don't have a ton of Joey. I'm sitting around over 20% in the low 20s right now, so I think he's a fine play. I'd rather play him over Truex, Hamlin, Kyle Busch today, but not as much as his other teammates.
I mean, I see the shirt. I mean, are we back on Team Blaney today? I mean, look, if we're talking about, hopping on the bandwagon, the bandwagon is pretty full today.
Yeah,
when it comes to Ryan Blaney.
It certainly is. I'm I'm planning on leading the bandwagon, though. I believe right now he's my highest owned driver on both sites, if not top two. But I love Ryan Blaney today. He was fast in practice, only $9,200 starting in 19th. You get some PD upside mixed in there with potential for a top 8, top 5 finish. If you're looking at the past 4 road course races for him, top 10 every single time. He's finished 6th at both road courses this year at Sonoma and Coda, and the 2nd place finish at the Indy road course last year. So I don't really see a reason not to like Blaney. I'd play him in cash games, and obviously I'm going overboard on tournaments too.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you're a Stokastic Plus Platinum member, you know that all of our tools love Ryan Blaney today, whether we're talking about, top 6, which, when I'm looking at that top driver tool, that's one of the things I'm looking at is that top 6 tool. More time, well, pretty much a majority of the time, I'm looking at that dominator. But today we've talked about why that just is not a big factor in terms of how we're developing our lineups here today. Now we got the man starting in 21st. That's AJ Allmendinger, 9,100 on DraftKings, 11,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, AJ Allmendinger, we didn't get too much practice data from him. We only got a 20th in the 1-lap run. He was complaining about his car a bit, but as Phil noted in his article, or it was on Twitter, I just remember reading it. He does do that quite often, so I'm not going to be overly concerned about it. And he did finish 19th at the last road course, but he was battling a steering issue, which is something pretty important to have at a road course because you're constantly going left, right on hard braking and turns. And he was in the top 10 for the majority of the day after he battled back. Like, that was very impressive from Dinger, even though he had those issues. Ended up spinning at the very end, so he finished 19th. And he's had really bad luck at road courses recently. 33rd at Coda when he could have potentially won that race in the last turn. 38th at the Charlotte Roval, but he won at the Indy road course. Anytime we're at a road course, you have to have Anderson Allmendinger starting in 21st. He's definitely that guy I'm going to get behind quite a bit. And I do think he is viable in cash games today.
Rick, appreciate the comment. Thanks for tuning in here on Sunday to the Stokastic.com NASCAR Live 4 Lock Show. Of course, we're getting you ready for today's NASCAR race. And there's already a question from Josh about William Byron. Josh, I'm just going to tell you your question. Byron in play for GPPs? Yeah. I think the question with William Byron, obviously a ton of place differential is there, Chris. He's starting 29th. He's $9,000 on DraftKings, 9,000 over on FanDuel. I think it's more of a question of, let's say you're a 20 max player. How much William Byron do you want to get to?
So it depends if you're trying to get contrarian or not, because I believe over on the site we have him around 40% owned today, which is obviously very, very high up. It's a very good spot for him because, if this was a type of track where you need dominator points, I could understand wanting to get away from Byron, but you only need a good finish from him. And he's starting in 29th. You don't have to worry about the dominator points that he'd missed out starting on the back. And he's typically a top 12 contender at all road courses. So outside of any issues for Byron, there's a pretty decent chance he'll end up being in the optimal lap. I know in the top 6 drivers still he's popping up there as well. So it's no secret about William Byron today. If I'm playing a 20 max, you have to decide if you're trying to get contrarian or not. So if he's going to be roughly around 40% owned, maybe a little bit higher than that at 20 max, I would probably either take an under 25% approach, or I'd probably try to get over like 55 to 60.
I would say this is just me in 20 max is I'm just trying to get as different as possible with all my lineups. So I'm not, Alex has talked about this of not playing against yourself, playing against the field. And that's what I do. And especially when I'm in 3 maxes, I'm trying to figure out how can I potentially get a little bit different here. Jim Ashley says, he goes, hey guys, do you think fading Larson, Elliott, and playing balanced line? I mean, look, if you're putting Larson and Elliott in the same lineup, I mean, you got to be thinking they're going to be 1-2.
Yeah, and even then, that's no guarantee for them to both be optimal because Kyle Larson would have to lead like half the race, and then you'd have to have a lot of these guys that have issues. I love the balanced approach today. That's why I'm not getting too much of those 2 drivers. I'm 100% not playing them together. I think that's actually a good rule to put up in Fantasy Crunch or whatever optimizer this weekend. But there is so many good plays coming up that we're about to talk about. You can go well-balanced this weekend and feel really good about it.
I mean, let's just say based on something that me and you talked about in Messenger, I might have put a Toyota group together in Fantasy Crunch. I might have.
That's fine. I think that's fine this weekend. What was the setting you used? Like a max of 1 or something?
Max of 1, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Fine. It's just, but that's one of the things of, where you use Fantasy Cruncher to your advantage of sitting there and saying, and of course I'm on checking drivers too, particularly at the bottom. We'll get to it's like one of the things, and we're going to get into mid-tier here in a second. It's like the amount of drivers that are from 6,000 to 8,900 on DraftKings is crazy this week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah, it really is. I've honestly never seen it spread out like that. It's really, you can do a lot of kind of crazy lineups this weekend.
Yeah. Of course, I mentioned about that top driver tool. If you want to get access to all the great tools and data we have over at Stokastic.com, you got to sign up for a Stokastic Plus Platinum Pass. And right now, if you've never been a member of Stokastic Plus, is a tremendous time to sign up, as you can get 50% off your first month. All you got to do is click the link in the video description below, or use that promo code NASCAR LBL, all word, all caps, NASCAR LBL for 50% off your first month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Of course, this is for new users only. I know we had a Stokastic Plus member take down the DraftKings contest last night in MMA. Of course, these are the tools that everyone over here at Stokastic.com uses every single day, no matter whether we're talking about NASCAR, we're talking about MLB, we're talking about MMA, whatever it is, we are all using these tools and content. So it's a great time to sign up. Use these tools to your advantage. Of course, you want to know what those ownership projections are going to be. That's obviously a key part of this. And of course, all the great content we have over there. So, of course, when you use that promo code, it lets them know what you heard about it over here at the NASCAR Live Before Lock Show. My Fielder AC Arc, I appreciate you in the super chat. He goes, why would anyone play someone named Chase? Best he can come around a second is Truex a good pick.
I like it. Points for the joke, but you say pick was Truex?
Yeah, is Truex a good pick? I mean, obviously, JGR car, Toyotas. We mentioned about how not exactly a car manufacturer that we're looking at today.
Yeah, I'm not really a huge fan of the Toyotas. Well, Truex is a very good road course racer. It's just so far this season with the next gen car. A lot of the times there's just manufacturers that completely miss on a week or just bad at certain types of tracks, and that's been Toyota road courses this year. So not a huge fan of Truex. Starting 15th, he's not the worst play in the world, but I don't think he's going to be in the optimal.
Now, you did mention there is one Toyota driver that is intriguing to you from that Joe Gibbs team, and that's Christopher Bell, who's starting 16th, 8,900 DraftKings, 800 on FanDuel. What are you liking about Christopher Bell as opposed to all the other Toyota drivers?
So unlike everybody else besides Bubba Wallace a little bit, he actually showed us some speed on Saturday, was 12th in the 1 lap in practice, 6th on the 5 lap. And if you're looking at his finishes so far this year, road courses obviously struggled at Sonoma, but 3rd at Coda, and just a very good road course racer in general. I like this price point starting at 16th. You can obviously a little bit more PD upside from guys like Kyle Busch, Chastain, Hamlin, and Truex, or not Chastain's not part of JGR. Apologize for that. But Christopher Bell, I like the price point. He's pretty easy to fit in and easily showed us some speed, which the other guys did not do.
Next up, you got Kurt Busch, another Toyota. He's starting 22nd, 8,700 DraftKings, 7,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Kurt Busch is another guy that's very good at road courses, like his other Toyota teammates. Bubba Wallace is his only teammate, but just including him with JGR. 34th in the 1 lap in practice, but he's an excellent road course racer. So it's kind of hard to kind of gauge what you want to do with Kurt Busch. But if you're just looking at Toyota and how their speeds have showed throughout the season at road courses and this weekend, I feel like being underweight on Kurt Busch is a pretty good way to go, because starting in 22nd, people are going to want to go with him because he offers you some PD upside. And if you're looking at track record at road courses, yeah, he definitely makes some sense. But 18th at Sonoma, and he was terrible at Sonoma for a while. He kind of got lucky finishing in 18th, and then 32nd at Coda. So I think he's going to be a bit of a trap play today. I'd rather play the drivers below him, even though they don't offer even close to the same place differential upside.
Hearing you talk there kind of just made something pop in my head here is, we talk about these groups that we set over at Fantasy Cruncher. And of course, the next 4 drivers we're going to talk about are all in the top 10.
Right.
What's your thoughts on the top 10 today of these drivers? Do you have a general thought of like, am I trying to limit exposure there?
I'm actually not. I do think it's good to have a mixture of PD plays and drivers in the top 10, but if it's going to be anything like Sonoma, we saw passing was very difficult. And a lot of the drivers that were fast in qualifying and fast in practice, they kind of qualified where you think they'd kind of finish. So while some guys will move through the field, I don't think it's, out of the scenario where Tyler Reddick, Cedric, and Briscoe, all these drivers, and Alex Bowman starting inside the top 10, they could honestly finish in the top 10. And if some of those place differential drivers like a Kevin Harvick or Jones struggle to move through the field, you'd rather have exposure on those guys in the top 10. So not too concerned about them starting up close to the front, because if passing is going to be difficult like we saw at Sonoma, then it's going to be a pretty good way to go.
Next up, we've got Tyler Reddick. He's starting 4th, 8,600 on DraftKings, 8,500 over on FanDuel.
Reddick's a pretty interesting GPP play. He was super fast in practice, one of the best cars, qualified in the top 5. He did finish 35th at Sonoma, but we can kind of look past that. 5th at Coda, 2nd at the Roval last year, 10th at Watkins Glen, and 8th at Coda again last season. He's going to have to sell out for a win. So this could go either really good or really bad. So just know that when you're rostering Tyler Reddick. But if it does kind of work out on the right side of strategy, there's a chance he could win this race and lead some laps.
Austin Cedric starting 5th. He's 8,500 on DraftKings, 10,500 over there on FanDuel.
Yeah, Cedric's one of the better road course racers in all of NASCAR. 5th at Sonoma earlier in the season, 8th at Coda. He had 4 Xfinity wins at road courses. I know he's still younger drivers, so people don't really want to view him like that, but the guy's a very polished road course racer, and I like his teammate Ryan Blaney a lot. Hopefully they correlate well today. I think Cedric can contend for a top 5. He has been top 4 in average green flag speed at the 2 road courses so far this season, so I think he's a pretty good tournament play today.
Then we got Chase Briscoe, who is starting 2nd, 8,300 on DraftKings, 7,800 over on FanDuel.
So Briscoe's a good way to get exposure to a driver that can lead laps early on, not named Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott, at a much cheaper price point on both sites, 83 and 78. He also ran the quickest 1-lap run in practice, and he's a pretty good road course racer. So I don't mind him in tournaments. Obviously wouldn't go there in cash games, but starting in 2nd, he's going to have to kind of hang around that top 3 for the majority of the day and probably get up front at some point, but I think that's certainly possible.
Then we got Alex Bowman starting 8th, 8,200 on DraftKings, 8,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, so getting to Alex Bowman here, starting in 8th, didn't run the fastest lap in practice, was P15, but he's a pretty good road course racer, one of the best average green flag speed times over the 2 road courses so far this year. And typically at road courses, we can see him contending for top 5, top 10s. Finished 2nd at Coda, could have won that race, 16th at Sonoma, but starting in 8th, I think he's a really good pivot off of Kevin Harvick today.
Speaking of Kevin Harvick, who is going to be a popular play today, starting 28th, so 1 spot ahead of William Byron here. He's 8,100 DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. We mentioned about going to be a popular play. Obviously, if you want to get a little different, going lesser on Kevin Harvick is going to be a way to do that. But, what do you like about Kevin Harvick today?
I like what I saw from him in Sonoma. It does give me some confidence heading into this weekend. The thing that's not giving me confidence is that he sucked in practice. He was P32 in the 1 lap and P20 in the 5 lap, obviously qualified quite poorly as well. So I don't think he's going to run as well as he did at Sonoma, where he finished 4th, and then 11th at Coda earlier in the year. But he's typically been good at technical road courses. The thing is, though, there's so many other good pivots right beside him, where if there wasn't a bunch of obviously good pivots and he was a little bit more expensive, I don't think it'd be kind of like a lock to play him in cash games. He's a cash game lock for me this weekend. I like what I'm saw with the other 2 road course races so far this year, but I do worry about the practice speeds. So I am getting to a lot of the other 8K drivers, and then Daniel Suarez as well, who we're about to talk about too.
Suarez at 17, 7,700 on DraftKings, 11,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest price discrepancies I think we've seen all season long. But this is going to lead to some pretty high ownership on Daniel Suarez over on DraftKings, and I still think he's going to have a good chunk of ownership over on FanDuel. He's our most recent winner at a road course. He was fast in practice. Trackhouse seems to have like the cheat cars at the road courses this year, so I'm not going to fight that. I'll just keep playing them. Starting in 17th, he's got a good mixture of place differential upside and finishing position upside, so I can definitely get behind a lot of Suarez today. And he's actually, I believe he just edged out Blaney as my highest owned driver on DraftKings today as well.
Next up, you got Eric Jones, who's starting 27th, 7,300 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I usually like Eric Jones at road courses, but he feels like a bit of a trap play to me today because people are going to gravitate towards him a little bit, starting nearly in 30th place. He did finish top 10 at Coda early in the year, and he finished P22 at Sonoma, but he got lucky with a lot of drivers pitting at the end. He gained a lot of spots there to P22. He was not a P22 car. He spun several times, was not great. And he was P33 in practice on Saturday. So for me, I would much rather gravitate towards a guy like Daniel Suarez rather than playing Eric Jones and chasing the PD upside.
Okay, Mike, are you just going to miss out on the potential narrative here?
What do we got?
Richie Petty turned 85 yesterday. He's going to be at the race today. Are we just going away for the narrative here? Get the boss man a win?
Well, hold on. We still have Todd Gillen. Maybe we can use our narrative on him since they're on the same team. We'll save it for Todd. How about that?
I saw that a little earlier. I was going to see if you threw that out there. We're always trying to, is there a paint skim narrative, podcast narrative, reality show narrative?
I'll do it. Yeah, Austin Dillon has the reality show narrative. So these are things to think about.
Every time I see a commercial for that reality show, my mind always goes like, I wonder if this is ever going to raise his ownership with just casual DFS players who just aren't in tune with NASCAR on the weekly basis.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. It's 4th of July weekend. Maybe we get some extra casuals. If you see Austin Dillon higher on than expected, maybe we can blame the reality show this weekend.
By the way, Jay asked if Suarez is taking the same car that he won at Sonoma.
I would imagine it's going to be pretty similar. I do not know exactly, so I don't want to tell you either way, but the Trackhouse cars have been dominant at both road courses this year, so I imagine nothing's going to change much.
Next up, you got Eric Amarola, who's starting 24, 7,100 on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel.
Amarola feels like Eric Jones, where he feels like a bit of a trap play. I mean, kind of P31 in practice, P23 in the 5 lap. Not usually a guy I roster too much of road courses anyway. P14 at Sonoma was pretty good, P19 at Coda, but I think there's better plays for cheaper than Eric Amarola today. I feel like he's going to finish pretty close to where he starts.
Then you got Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting 33rd, 6,900 on DraftKings, 5,000 on FanDuel.
Kind of feels like the other two drivers we just talked about. Stenhouse feels like a bit of a trap today. If there's attrition and he just stays clean, yeah, he could contend for a top 25 and that'd be fine. But P27 in practice, P18 in the 5 lap, starting at 33rd, yes, it's enticing, but he has an average finish of 25th at the technical road courses the past couple of seasons, average rank position of 25th. So it's not like he's getting unlucky. 25th at Sonoma, 37th at Coda. He's had a couple good finishes last year, but with the next gen car, I'm not a huge fan of Stenhouse at the road course this weekend.
And Josh asked about Amarola or Stenhouse in GPPs.
So if I'm forced to pick between the two, I feel like they'll finish pretty close to each other. And if that's going to be the case, give me Stenhouse starting 9 spots further back.
One guy that I just feel like we constantly, we're less exposed on him week in and week out. It seems more times than not, he just proves us wrong. Is Michael McDowell. Now he's starting 6 today. He's 6,800 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. But I feel like every time we kind of like we're kind of down on him, he goes out there and just puts up a solid number.
Yeah, McDowell's been balling out. I'll give him respect. He's been doing great. And I might just drink the Kool-Aid this weekend. I actually have him on one of my 3 max lines on DraftKings. That was a little bit risky, but I'm willing to roll the dice here. But he was P8 in practice. He's starting in 6. He actually has some good history at Road America, not in the Cup Series, but he's won in lower level series before, even outside of the Xfinity Series. So he's got a pretty good track record here, no matter what the car is. So I think Michael McDowell is a pretty good tournament play here. Finished P3 at Sonoma, was very fast, P13 at Coda. I think he can hang around the top 10 for a good chunk of the day. And I have more exposure to Michael McDowell today than I do Stenhouse, so that tells you anything.
I mean, look, if you're just looking at a fantasy score aspect, you go back to the last 10 races for Michael McDowell on this season.
Yeah.
He's been rock solid.
Yeah, he really has.
I mean, you're talking about his lowest score is 21 points back at the AdventHealth 400.
Right.
That's his lowest score.
Yeah. He's been very consistent. Very consistent.
And I feel like I'm never on him.
It's just his price is always a little bit weird. And I mean, median projections, if you're looking at the numbers, he just tends to outperform his projections usually. And I think it's kind of time we should probably start adjusting that, which is something I did this week. And I did give him more juice than I did last road course in a similar spot.
Yeah. I mean, you look at Sonoma, perfect example, starts 4th.
Right.
And you're like, oh man, 4th, he's 7,100. Guy goes out there, finishes 3rd. And pulls out 42 points.
Right. And he outscored a lot of those cheap PD plays in the back that a lot of people gravitated towards.
It's like one of those things of like, sometimes I'm like, we just overthink this too much.
Right. Like he's fast in practice, fast in qualifying. He's been good. Just accept it.
Yeah. But he is someone that, I mean, look, if you're looking to get away from the chalk and you think he can replicate what he did at Sonoma, man, he's a great leverage play today.
He really is. Because I mean, I personally have more Michael McDowell exposure than I have Amarola, Stenhouse, and Jones, and they're all big PD plays. I think there's a much better chance McDowell finishes top 8 than those other 3 drivers finish in the top 15 today.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next driver. We got Brad Keselowski. He's starting 11, 6,600 on DraftKings, 5,200 on FanDuel.
Yeah, he's been pretty solid the 2 road course races so far this year, 10th at Sonoma and 14th at Coda. And looking at his practice speeds, he was, I believe 19th in the 1 lap, and then top 10 in the 5 lap. I think he can knock on the door for a top 12, and kind of similar to Michael McDowell. I have more exposure to him than I do these PD plays in the back.
Then you got Bubba Wallace, who is starting 25th, 6,500 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. He is getting some ownership. He has a Toyota, though.
Yeah, I'm personally not a fan of it. I know he was kind of fast in practice, P16 in the 1 lap, P12 in the 5 lap, but he's just an awful road course racer. If you're looking at some of his finishes so far this year, pulling them up, 36 at Sonoma, 30 at Dakota. It's just he runs into issues a lot. I mean, there's been a couple times he's had good finishes, but we're talking about a guy that really just battles for top 25s at road courses. Plus, he got into a fight with, I believe it was his crew chief last week after an issue on pit road. So it's just been a bad time for Bubba. He finished well last week, but it was a bit of an experience.
Didn't he like blow a tire at Sonoma? Is that what I'm thinking?
Oh, I believe he was like the first driver that had an issue. It might have been.
Yeah, I remember because I remember I had him, and I remember he was out of the race pretty quickly. I don't remember. There was something that the reason he got out pretty early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just usually when you cross those guys having in their outlet pretty early, you tend to remember that stuff.
Oh yeah, you remember it way more often than you do remember someone doing well for you.
Exactly. Next up, we got Chris Buescher, who is starting 7th, 6,200 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel.
Chris Buescher to me is like the same exact play as Michael McDowell, just one extra PD spot and a little bit cheaper. Both are very solid at road courses. He finished second at Sonoma. Then he finished third at the Charlotte Roval last year, showed some speed in practice, fell off in the 5-lap run, but I'm not overly concerned about it. Typically a top 50 contender road courses. I have no problem with Chris Buescher today. Pretty even split on him and McDowell.
And Joseph mentions it was engine failure.
Engine failure, okay.
Yeah. Next up, reality show narrative, Austin Dillon, starting 20th,
Right.
6,200 on DraftKings, 6,000 on FanDuel. I feel like if we had a race on USA, then we'd really have the narrative.
Yes, we're digging really deep on narrative. We don't have much narratives this weekend.
No, we don't.
Just grasping at straws at this point. But anyway, for Austin Dillon, back in the day, awful road course racer. I'd fade him just about each and every single time, but he's definitely gotten a lot better. In the past 6 races at technical road courses, he's finished in the top 15 each and every single time. Basically kind of bounces around 11th to 15th place for the most part. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does something similar today. So I have a little bit more exposure to Dillon than I do guys like Buescher and McDowell just because of the extra PD spots, but he's kind of in the same boat as them. It's just a nice cheap play.
Next up, you got the man starting 10th. That is Cole Custer, 6,100 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I typically hate playing Cole Custer. I'm going to play a little bit of him this weekend because he was 11th in the 1 lap in practice, but I have more exposure to some of the PD drivers in the 5K range than I do Cole Custer, but I think he's kind of interesting in tournaments because of the speed he showed, but that's really about it. He's a pretty risky play today.
Then the final driver in this group will be Todd Gillen, who is starting 32nd, 6,000 on DraftKings, 3,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised at the price point on Gillen this weekend. Usually we get him in the lower 5K range. Just seemed like he got a bit aggressive on the pricing. I don't see a real good reason why he should be more expensive than a Justin Haley or a Ty Dillon. Did finish 16th at Dakota, 24th at Sonoma, but at $6,000, I'd much rather play a guy like Austin Dillon with actual top 12 upside.
Of course, this is the Stokastic.com NASCAR live before lock chillers getting you ready for today's race there at Road America. And we are sponsored by Prize Picks. Of course, you can sign up for Prize Picks over at prizepicks.com or download their app in the App Store, Google Play Store. Of course, just like me right here on the phone, got it up and going here. And of course, looking at some of the fantasy scores today. And we're targeting Toyotas here on the fantasy score. First off, we'll talk about Kyle Busch. Just want to make sure that line has not changed at all here of 40.5 on him. And Kyle Busch is 40.5 still.
Yeah, so for me, I basically just took an anti-Toyota approach in Prize Picks today. Could have bite me, sure, but just looking at the numbers, basing off what we've seen this season, I think this is the right approach more often than not. Kyle Busch at 40.5, we basically need a top 9 from him, and I don't really see that happening today. Again, had the engine issues, going to the rear of the field, wasn't fast in practice anyway. I kind of have a hard time seeing him knocking the door for a top 10.
Martin Truex Jr., he has come down a little bit. He's now 39.5.
So I believe when we first saw it, he was at 41.5. So we're talking about a top 8 from Martin Truex. Now we're talking about kind of about a top 10. Again, though, similar to Kyle Busch, where I just don't think the Toyotas are going to have the raw speed to knock into the top 10. And if passing's a little bit tough, I think they're probably going to get stuck in those teen range.
Kurt Busch, 36.5. That number has not moved.
Yeah, so for Kurt to get the number, he's going to have to get a 14th or better place finish, which I don't really see happening today. He was awful in practice, awful at Sonoma, was kind of close to a top 15 at the end of the day, but then just kept falling back. If his practice, I don't think he's going to be a 30th place car like practice would indicate, but I do think he's going to struggle today to get into the top 15.
One of the things I do like to look at NASCAR is those fastest laps, especially when we're talking about today. There's only 2 drivers listed on fastest laps today. That's right. Chase Elliott and Kyle Busch. Chase Elliott 9.5.
Yeah, the thing is, I wanted to stay away from those because I could see Chase Elliott being up front and leading a good chunk of laps today. And if he does that, he'll probably be the fastest car. So that could kill you in stage 1. So I personally wasn't willing to go on a fast lap approach. I think the Larson one for the laps led
5.5.
5.5 now?
Yeah.
Really? I got the 9.5 last night, so that got cut in half. Or is it fast laps or laps led?
Fastest laps.
Okay, sorry, I was on laps led, but yeah, for fast
laps led, Kyle is 8.5.
Okay.
Chase is 19.5.
Phew. I did a 5-man flex with the Larson under 9.5, so that did go down a little bit, but the lap leads and fast laps were kind of tough for me this week. And I like approaching those better on dominator type tracks because I think there's a lot of value on those here and there. But at a track like a road course, it's going to be a little bit tricky for me.
Of course, you got to check out our friends over there at Prize Picks and be sure to use that promo code AWESEMOs. They got an instant first match deposit up to $100. So put $100 in, they give you $100. Man, maybe you only put 20 in, they'll give you $20. So you got to take advantage over there at Prize Picks. Great to play over there, whether you want to play NASCAR. We'll play a little MLB. It's going on right now, actually, because I've got some Prize Picks plays that I'm kind of monitor over here to the left-hand side. If some of these Yankee bats would, I don't know, hit the ball out of the ballpark, that'd be kind of nice. That's kind of what I'm looking at here this afternoon. But gotta check out our friends over there at Prize Picks. Like I said, be sure to use that promo code also for instant first match deposit of up to $100. Let's move over to the low end of the salaries here, as we have got under 6,000. We'll start off right with a guy that is a guy that everyone is looking at here today, Justin Haley, starting 34th. He's 5,900 on DraftKings, 4,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, good reason to like Justin Haley today. Not that his practice speeds were super impressive, was P25 in the 1 lap, but even then, I would take a 25th place finish at this price point and where he's starting. But the 2 road course races we've had so far this year, 12th at Sonoma, 15th Dakota, starting this far back in the field, really only one way to go for Justin Haley, and it's probably going to be up.
Todd Gillen starting 30th, 5,500 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I don't like him as much as Justin Haley, but I do think he's a pretty interesting pivot. Was P23 at Sonoma, P20 in Coda, but he was really fast in practice, like we were talking about. We still have the petty narrative going here. P9 in the 1 lap and P4 in the 5 lap. He was pure speed. Usually he's super slow in practice, but that shows some speed, so I think he's a pretty intriguing play starting in 30th.
Joey Han starting 9th. Do you want to get there?
I have a sprinkle of Joey Han in case he just shocks the road and wins the race somehow, because he was super fast. P7 in the 1 lap in practice. Honestly thought he was going to get on the pole during qualifying for a second, but ended up dropping off on one of the turns. My only concern with Joey Han is that he's in a Rick Ware car, and is that going to hold up throughout the entire race? That's always a great question. I'd love to know. But starting in 9th, I can't get to much of him just because the guys he's priced around with Ty Dillon and Justin Haley. But to have a sprinkle of Han in case he runs in the top 10 all day, I think it's worth a bit in tournaments.
I guess from this point on, everyone else, I almost feel like we got to sprinkle in here together of who is in the worthy of being checked in terms of putting in lineups.
Shoo. So we're speaking about LaJoy, Burton, Ware, Balicki, Tillian, Heisman. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. It's not too great of a group here. The one thing I will say is Cody Ware, Joey Han's teammate, was P14 in practice. I don't think he's going to be a P14 card during the race. If I was forced to play any of these guys, I think Corey LaJoy is the one I get to the most of just because he's starting next to dead last. But if you're looking at practice, he was P35 in the 1 lap, P22 in the 5 lap, and looking at his finishes at road courses the past 3 times, 34th, 36th, and 35th. It's not been pretty for LaJoy, but if he does not wreck today, there's a good chance he's in the top 30.
You mentioned about Cody Ware. I mean, can you trust a Rick Ware car? I mean, it's a legitimate question.
Well, okay. So looking at his finishes at road courses, 32nd at Sonoma, 27th Dakota. That's a great day for Cody Ware. Then last year, 36th, 40th, and then 31st. I would rather trust Joey Hand than Cody Ware. The problem is Joey Hand starting about 20 spots further up. So I'm not personally going to get on the Cody Ware train just because he was fast in practice. I'll let other people do that.
Of course, you got any questions, be sure to line those up in chat. Do want to mention about a question I got a little earlier in before the show. We'll start here. 2v2 DraftKings single entry. So one side of the equation, you got Austin Dillon and Todd Gillen.
Okay.
Or Buescher and Haley.
Oh, it's pretty easily the Buescher and Haley side for me. Buescher was fast at the last road course, and Haley is basically a free square today if he doesn't wreck.
Favorite GPP play on DraftKings?
Ooh, the favorite GPP play. Well, as far as low ownership is concerned, I'm thinking it's going to be kind of like that 8K range with a Reddick or an Alex Bowman or an Austin Cedric. Those are the three guys I'm landing on like the most as far as being overexposed to the field for the most part.
See here. Jim says, I may be crazy, but is Balickia good for value?
So he's actually not a terrible road course racer given the kind of equipment he's in. And he was P24 and P21 in practice. He just had finishes of 29th, 22nd, 20th, and 18th, which again, when she compares equipment and his price tag, that's not terrible. The problem is he's starting 26, so his upside kind of got capped. So I'm not going to get to Balicki today.
FanDuel GPP, Hamlin or Truex?
Ooh, if it's over on FanDuel and price does not matter. I believe they're about the same price. I would probably go with Truex there because of his good finish at Coda.
Yeah, and ownership pretty much is pretty identical on both those guys too. If Ty Dillon gets 40 DraftKings points, is he optimal?
Well, if he gets 40 DraftKings points, it's going to depend on what other drivers do. Because if Justin Haley gets, let's say, 45 DraftKings points, there's a chance that Ty Dillon doesn't quite make it. If some other drivers happen to, succeed as well. So it's kind of an open-ended question because there's got to be a whole bunch of different scenarios. So there's not like a threshold a driver has to get to be optimal because it just can depend on what the other part of the field does.
Last man in a GPP, McDowell, Buescher, or Austin Dillon?
Ooh. So I actually was in the same scenario building a lineup, and I ended up going with McDowell. So I would recommend doing the same thing I did, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at what he did in Sonoma, right. You got to imagine the same type of setup there. Are there any drivers in particular you can point to that might stay out for stage points, more likely for playoff purposes, but could punt the final position for this race?
So for stage points, if you look up the NASCAR point standings, some drivers that don't have wins this year or going for points that, well, the drivers that have not yet won this year, they're going to be going for the win at the end. Drivers that could get some points that are kind of in the threshold a little bit. I had to pull up the point standings, but it's not really something I am considering too much this weekend. Maybe a later on road course, but for me, I'm only looking at some drivers that maybe need to go for the win, like a Tyler Reddick, but I'm not overly concerned about it this weekend.
Someone is asking about where you can watch this race. By the way, it is on USA.
Yes.
Just saying. I mean, like if you're looking for a little bit of a narrative, just saying.
The only thing we got this weekend, we don't have much.
Yeah. William Byron or AJ Allmendinger DraftKings GPP?
If it's a GPP, I think Allmendinger will be a little bit lower owned than William Byron for sure. So if you're looking for a pivot, I don't mind that at all.
Let's see here. 2v2, Blaney and Elliott or Cedric and Larson. This is for a FanDuel single entry.
If it's FanDuel, I'm going to go with Blaney and Elliott there. I like Elliott a little bit more than Larson today, and Blaney is kind of even with Byron.
Of course, if you got any other questions, be sure to line those up in chat. We got about 15 minutes here left in the show to answer any NASCAR DFS questions you have here on today's slate. But do want to let you know about the Stokastic MVP program, where you can get exclusive Stokastic discounts and the first crack at beta testing new tools and features by joining our Stokastic MVP text program. Sign up right now by texting MVP22. Once again, that's MVP22 to 1-660-656-4417, and you'll automatically be entered to win a a year of Stokastic Plus Platinum. For more information, simply click in the link in the video description below. So be sure to check that out. Of course, we're here to answer any question you have. You can line those up in our YouTube chat. If you are a Stokastic Plus member, throw that question over in our Discord channel. Be sure to mention me so I'll see it pop up here on my screen so I'll know that you got a question here for the show. Next up, Matt's got a 2v2. Since he did not mention what site, I'm going to guess it's DraftKings. That's just kind of typically how I figure it is. Haley and Bell or Dylan and Blaney. Of course, doesn't say whether it's Austin or Ty.
I'm going to go with the Blaney side there. I do like Bell today, but there is like concerns that he just kind of sucks with the rest of Toyota. So I'm going to go with the Blaney side there.
Ryan goes, I have no clue what I'm doing for NASCAR. And he's going to be checking everything you got here. And look, I mean, I think every week here on the show, we get people who they just love playing DFS. Right. And, they're not big into NASCAR. Like how would you tell them to kind of start?
So the first thing you have to do every single week is identify what kind of track you're at, because the strategy is going to change each and every single week. Because last week we were on here, we're talking dominator points, we're talking Toyotas, we're talking about how much we love them. This weekend, complete opposite. I don't really like Toyota too much this weekend. There's no dominator points to go around. So there's a different strategy at every single racetrack, and that's where you find your edge, because some people will just play the same kind of drivers no matter what kind of track we're at. And that's the wrong approach. So just talking roster construction, things like that, watching these shows, reading our articles, it's probably the best way to go about it.
Lego over our Discord channel. Want to know your thoughts on Bubba Wallace?
Well, I don't usually play Bubba Wallace at road courses. I know the PD is enticing, but show a little bit of speed in practice, but I'm just not a huge fan of him at road courses. I'd rather get the drivers that were much faster, like Michael McDowell, Keselowski, Chris Buescher this weekend.
Is Blaney good for GPP and single entry?
He's going to be popular today, so don't think you're getting a little bit contrarian with him, but I still like him in all formats today. He's one of my favorite picks in the slate.
By the way, Jordan, if you're a WWE fan, check out that Izzy walkout last night. You'll have to check it out. It was he did the whole Undertaker walking in last night. He had the urn with his opponent's name on the urn, had the hat and everything. Yeah, if you're a WWE fan, even if you don't even like MMA, you'd find that walkout pretty cool. Now the fight exactly wasn't very fun, but let's see here. Single entry GPP, Bowman or Harvick?
If it's a GPP and you already have some other PD plays, I'd try to get the Bowman there just because he's going to be lower owned, and I think there's a better chance he finishes in the top 10 than Kevin Harvick does in the top 15.
Ty Dillon or Haley, DraftKings GPP?
I would go with Haley there. I feel like they're basically the same-ish play, but you get 4 extra spots with Haley.
Yeah. Taking price into consideration, which do you like more on DraftKings, Elliott or Chastain? I think I know the answer, but
yeah, it's definitely Ross for me. 2 great plays, obviously, but Ross gets the extra PD spots, and I feel like at the end of the day, they're going to be pretty close to each other where they finish.
Yeah. By the way, Ryan mentioned about how the McMahon trio was there. I just think the funniest part is they show him on the broadcast as Vince, I think has never been to a UFC event, Stephanie and Triple H. And then you got Pat McAfee there, clearly just chugging down some fine quality adult beverage. Clearly made his way to the concession stand, or he might just walked in with that drink in hand.
Pat's a wild man.
Yeah. He's a wild man. Let's see here. Paul, how many dominators needed for large field GPPs? Today's just not a dominators race.
Yeah, I mean, for him to be optimal, you're going to need a good chunk of dominator points. There's 43 available. If you give him like 20-ish laps led and a good decent chunk of those being fast laps, and he wins, that'll do the job. But you're basically just playing drivers for where they finished today, really.
Another 2v2, and both sides have Blaney. Side 1 is Byron and Blaney. Side 2 is Logano and Blaney.
Oh, I have to go with the Byron side there. I mean, I know it's kind of nice to correlate it with the 2 Penske cars, but I think Byron getting an extra 10 extra PD spots makes sense.
Austin Dillon or Brad Keselowski, last man in on DraftKings.
For me, it'd be Austin Dillon. They're pretty close to each other, but I'll take the extra spots.
Is Loris Hasemans, if I'm probably not saying his name right, but is he a terrible play? So he was say to start 36, well, he's to the rear, so goes back one spot. And he's the bare minimum on DraftKings today at 4,500.
He's probably a terrible play. I mean, even if he has a good race today where he finishes inside the top 30, I don't think it's going to be optimal. You don't really have to go down that low today because there's so many good mid-range plays where, yeah, maybe if Heasmans gets 25 points, sure, that's fine. But let's say Haley and Dillon get 35 apiece. It's not going to be an optimal over those guys.
Ryan, by the way, Jessica Rose Clark did come out with Shawn Michaels' entrance music. She lost in 42 seconds and looks like she is going towards elbow surgery because, she got armbarred and she is in a sling right now and she ain't going to be fighting for anytime soon here. Who's a driver we're not talking about today?
Who did we not talk about much at all? I don't think we've talked about I think we kind of avoided that mid 8K range. There's guys starting close to the front like Reddick, Cedric, Briscoe. We haven't got much questions about them, but these are guys that have legit race winning upsides. Do not forget about them in tournaments. And a lot of people are going to flock to the Byrons, the Bells, the Harvicks because they have PD upside. But Cedric could very well win this race. Tyler Reddick could very well win this race. So in tournaments, do not forget about those guys.
Which driver should I go most over the field on in a 20 max GPP on DraftKings?
So I went most over the field on Daniel Suarez today in all formats. I locked him in my 3 max. Feels a little bit scary to do, but I like what I've seen from him at road courses this year, so I'm just going with it.
Would you play Cedric and Tyler Reddick on the same line for a DraftKings GPP?
Yeah, if you do that, I would recommend getting some PD in there. So try not to get it was Reddick and Cedric, correct?
Cedric and Reddick, yes.
Yeah, so I would avoid putting in a Briscoe with them. I'd avoid probably getting a Chase Elliott. So just try to balance out your lineup a bit with that.
How many points do you need today per driver to win?
It's kind of an open-ended question because the slate can be very dependent on what happens. So there's no given threshold that your driver has to reach.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about this in MMA, and I say it's the chase to get to 650. Because that's what you're going to need to take down one of these GPPs. But I mean, today's kind of a weird race just because of the dominator aspect of it. Clement over at Escort says thoughts on the Busch brothers. Of course, we know Kyle going to the back, starting 13th, Kurt starting 22nd.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of either Busch brother today. I mean, just not a huge fan of the Toyotas. They haven't really ran well at the road courses this year. Obviously, weren't very fast in practice. Busch is going to the rear. Not that it really changes anything for me, but finishes of 30th and 20th, the 2 road courses this year. If you're just looking at the numbers, and I mean, they would tell you not to really want to be on Toyota this weekend.
Matt mentions that we had not mentioned much about Loris. I think there's a reason we haven't mentioned much about him.
Yeah, I mean, he's starting dead not completely dead last, but close to it. It's just unless there's like 20 cars that wreck out, I can't see him being the optimal lineup. Like he finished 34th at Coda. I'd say that's probably a good day for Hasemans if he finishes 34th. So upside is very limited for him.
I mean, look, I get why someone would want to go down in that range. The thought of like, look, even if he's a complete bust play, you're not losing much. And it's so much salary relief. But like what I personally do when it comes to drivers in that range, that under 5,000 range, I'm kind of looking at a couple of different factors over our top driver tool. I'm looking at ownership first off. Okay. Is one of them getting any type of ownership? And then 2, I'm looking at a top 6%. So what's the chance they can finish in the top 6? Or if I put them in my lineup, who does it allow me to get to that maybe I wouldn't be able to get to if I didn't have them in the lineup?
Yeah, I think when we have like dominator type weeks where we have 400 or 500 laps, maybe that's when you can start sprinkling the 2 to 3% of these drivers. But on a track where you don't really need the dominator points and it's not a super speedway, I just don't see the need for them. Like the pricing isn't that rough this weekend. Like you can start a lot of your laps just with Blaney and go down from there. And you don't have to get much cheaper than a mid 6K driver or Justin Haley or Ty Dillon. If you're going down there, I just think your roster construction is a bit off for the type of race that we have this weekend.
course, appreciate everyone that's watching here for the NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Do us a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up button. That really does help us out a lot as well. If we can get over 100 likes before we wrap up the show, really would appreciate that. Let's mention, and of course, you guys subscribe to the channel so you keep up with everything we got going on over here at YouTube. Let's do a question from Discord. Is Stenhouse a decent play in single entry? Seems like people are staying away from him. Sounds like a good pivot. Logan mentioned that.
Well, see, I kind of have the opposite viewpoint. I think people are going to play him because he's starting 33rd, and I kind of want to get away from that for the likes of guys like McDowell, Keselowski, Chris Buescher, because people are always enamored with massive PD upside. Like Stenhouse, yeah, he's probably going to gain spots today, but if a guy like McDowell is able to hold a top 6 or Buescher is able to hold a top 8, Keselowski's knocking the door for a top 10. I'd much rather have those drivers instead. I feel like, yes, Stenhouse has a lot of place differential upside, but he's probably going to be in the back for a good chunk of the day.
Blaney or Byron, last man in?
If it's tournaments, Blaney. If it's cash games, I'll go with Byron.
Cole, I have no idea whose Pete's lock driver day is, and usually when it happens with Pete, that driver usually blows a tire, magically is out of the race pretty early on in that. Who finishes better, Joey Han or Joey Logano?
Honestly, that's not a bad question.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, it's like I could see a scenario where Joey Han does beat out Joey Logano today straight up. Although projection wise, I would say Logano.
Byron fade?
I would not fade Byron today. It's just starting nearly in 30th place at a road course, and he's pretty solid at road courses. It's just one of those spots where I'm going to eat the chalk and I'll try to get different like else from my lineup.
Cedric or Briscoe, DraftKings, GPP, and who would you rather leave off a lineup, Byron or Harvick?
So between Cedric and Briscoe, I feel like they're very similar plays. I'll take the extra 3 spots with Cedric, and he's been very good at road courses this year. And I would rather leave off Harvick because there's so many other good mid-range plays. And obviously there's good plays with Boyle and Byron as well, but it's kind of easy to get off Harvick for the likes of like a Suarez or a Bowman.
Yeah. $121 single entry. What 2 drivers are you starting with?
I would be starting with William Byron and Daniel Suarez.
All right. Bell or Truex, GPP, FanDuel?
For me, it's Christopher Bell. He's like the 1-2 that I think showed some promise.
Would you rather play Buescher and McDowell? Would you play Buescher and McDowell in one lineup?
I think it's fine if you do, but at that point, I'm probably trying to avoid drivers like Tyler Reddick, Cedric, Briscoe, because you're getting real top heavy.
Like, look, we're gonna get off this show. I'm gonna start finalizing lineups, and I'm gonna have to put Michael McDowell in at least one of my 3 max, at least.
Yeah,
at least.
Yep, that's what I did too. And I mean, it felt weird doing it, but it's like, I mean, the speed's there. He's done it before. I'm just accepting it.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at me, he's been a DFS, quality lineup guy. I mean, that's the reality of it. Anything you want to mention with everyone before we get out of here? Of course, lock 3:23 p.m. each time over there on DraftKings.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 things. One, road courses are pretty boring to watch. And number 2, as far as your DFS lineups are, there's going to be a lot of drivers on different strategies. So you might be sucking during the majority of the race, but once strategy plays out, you might end up doing well. And if you're doing well, you might end up doing terrible. So just kind of check your lineups at the end with 3 laps left or something.
Yeah. That's the thing with NASCAR. It's all you always say. You never want to be winning a good chunk of money, start middle of the race, that last end of the race when you were paying attention to. But we do appreciate everyone checking out the NASCAR Live for Lock show here, right here on Stokastic.com. Of course, hit that thumbs up button. We really do appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week here on Live for Lock. And have a good everybody, and have a safe 4th of July weekend.